All right, here we are, November 17th, Thanksgiving right around the corner. We're going to bring you the dose of common sense you need before you go into the chaotic, non-commonsensical world of family Thanksgiving dinners. And what do I mean by that? Well, all those people who don't listen to our show, Common Sense Ohio, which you can check out, of course, at commonsenseohioshow.com, brought to you by Harper Plus Accounting. If you don't know about Harper Plus Accounting by now, all you got to do is go check him out on his website, or better yet, go back and listen to the episode, 2 or 3, 4 or 5, 6, hundreds of episodes ago. You can listen to us talk to Glenn Harper, who is the founder of Harper Plus Accounting, and his philosophy on bean counting. And it's not just transactions, guys. It's all sorts of stuff for your small businesses, for your personal, for your big businesses, medium businesses. Everybody's got something that they can grab from Glenn when it comes to tax accounting, financial planning, etc. And he's doing nothing but growing and expanding into all sorts of other areas. With that, without further ado, we should jump right into our Thanksgiving episode here on November 17, 2023. So next Thursday is Thanksgiving. This is the Friday before. Whenever this gets dropped, you'll know. But, there's lots to be thankful for this year. There's lots that you can complain about this year. But I suggest we start with the thankful and not go into the negative.
And we do that enough.
We do it enough.
We do.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes care of 364 days, honestly. So
yeah,
we should be thankful. I'm thankful for you guys, honestly.
Yep.
I love doing this podcast.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yep. I am.
Right off the bat.
And I'm thankful to Sarah Josepha Hale, who apparently is the godmother of Thanksgiving. She writes a letter to Abe Lincoln, I think back in 1863-ish, suggesting Thanksgiving. She's an incredible woman. Go Google her, which I did this morning. She did things like, Mary Had a Little Lamb. She had a publication she was the editor-in-chief of, and because of her, Abe Lincoln sent a letter and sort of created Thanksgiving as a national holiday. So we can all be thankful. I'm not going to belabor the point too much here, but it's some interesting history, Norm.
Apparently, Canada does a holiday on Thanksgiving, obviously not related to ours, but apparently other, I don't know what they picked up on. A Viking landed in Newfoundland, and I don't know, but apparently there's a Canadian version.
Is there? Well, yeah.
Well, it's an occasion to drink, and we know our friends up north. So.
Yeah. So get drunk, have fun, and talk about the Canucks.
Right. Play a hockey game. Did anything happen in World War II on this date?
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll just kind of bide time here if you want. It's interesting. They after all the drama in D.C., getting a new speaker, and throwing out Kevin McCarthy, so. Ostensibly, that entire fight was over the budget process, right?
Yes.
And what did the new speaker just do? He
agreed. Kick the can down the road again.
Kick the can down the road. So,
right.
The schism there, between, this is unfair, the Neanderthal wing of the Republican House, or whatever you want to call them, which I would be in if I was there, right? Because until the Republican Party gets over its fear of a limited, brinksmanship kind of government shutdown and embraces that is exactly what's going to have to happen, they're going to have to draw a line in the sand at some point and say, hey, guys, we just can't keep borrowing money at the rate that we're borrowing. The dollar will become, worthless. And the percentage of the U.S. budget going to service the debt is going to be so large, we won't be able to pay for the military, for Social Security, for a number of other things. And at some point, the $34 trillion in debt has to be addressed. And the only way it can be addressed is through reforming the budget process. So, I know they fear being blamed by the mainstream media that the Republicans once again shut down the government, but they have to fear destruction of the country more than fearing the media fingering them. Right. They, at some point they have to really get a hold of themselves and just say, yeah, you know what, go ahead and blame us. But the country needs to be saved, and we need to stop the bleeding.
Well, and there's a time when they have to consider, okay, you're a countryman. You're doing this to save the country.
Yep.
Be damned if you're going to get reelected or not. Do the right thing now, because this is what you were elected to do.
Right.
Yeah,
know?
these jackasses, and I say all of them. I mean,
Absolutely.
I say,
Right.
It's like
Absolutely.
it's like it is a complete. It's crazy town.
Right.
I mean, then you see like
We're
Jim McCarthy was
smearing.
accused of punching.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah, I
And
saw
then
that.
you got Gates jumping in the charade, and he's filing ethics complaints. I mean, it's like,
Jeez.
come on, this is absurd.
It's playground crap.
You know what it is?
Playground crap.
It really
It's
is.
like these guys are like the next generation, and it's just getting so absurd.
Right.
That these are the leaders of our government,
Right.
and they're acting like buffoons.
I mean, I like this new speaker as a human being. I mean,
Sure.
he
seems good
great.
enough.
He seems good enough. You know, and I'm sure the reason he did this CR is he couldn't get the majority of people, because he is one of the Neanderthal Republic. He couldn't get enough people to back him.
Well, it's the same deal that McCarthy was going to cut. It's just so
Exactly right.
stupid. And
It
you know,
really is the same deal.
Look, Republicans, you don't have the presidency and you don't have the Senate, and you've got a very thin majority in the House.
Yeah.
It's like you're not going to get this crap done.
Yeah, it's like 5 votes.
Just go do the damn job.
Right.
And you know,
And
McCarthy
take the
actually
hits. Take the hits.
had gotten some concessions, had done a decent job, and then we go through this little circus.
Yeah.
And now here we are back where we started after the circus, and these guys are punching each other in the hallways. It's like,
A lot of this is
it's so stupid.
you know, they're terrible at marketing and packaging why they do things. And we talked about this
Yeah.
about abortion
You're right.
last week. This could be presented to the American public as an emergency. This is a one-time thing that we're doing to shut the government down until we can bring the other side to their senses and communicate that, you know, in a message.
Well, to their defense, though, they don't have the media at their disposal
No.
as the other side does. They really don't.
So they need to run
a
some
shutdown
ads.
is always blamed on
That's
the
right.
Republicans. Always,
Right.
always. Even if it's the Dems that are not budging, it's always the Republicans that get blamed, right or wrong. I
That's
mean,
right.
that's just the media
And
always blames them.
unfortunately, the mainstream Republican boosters, your typical like chambers of commerce,
Yeah.
they all want the CRs. You know, like the people that you would think would want budget discipline are like, yeah, let's keep kicking the can down the road because they don't want any disruption
Yep.
in doing business with the government.
Well, and you know, I guess this is a broader topic. Now we're talking about budget and money and everything else. It's like I think our country as a whole, and I'm going to blame maybe the younger generations, the last 3 generations, or the ones, and even mine to some extent. We've just gotten used to this idea that it's okay to keep spending money that we don't have. It's okay to keep printing money that we don't have. It's okay to have this absurd debt. And, you know, start thinking about for a second, what happens when the dollar is no longer the gold standard in the world? What happens when the U.S., as I think it just recently had, our credit worthiness was downgraded?
It was.
It's like, look, folks, you can't live like this forever. You couldn't live like this at your home. So
No.
what makes you think you can scale it up and live like this at a global level? You cannot do it. We can't do it. And we're spending money that we don't have for personal political gain.
That's right.
So these idiots are voting on, and both sides are doing it.
Yeah.
These idiots are voting on crap and trying to cram their programs or quote programs and policies through, and we can't afford it. And they're doing it only so they can just say who they're helping or what they're giving. I mean,
We need a reset of a different kind. You know, the people talk about the Soros reset, but actually we need a conservative reset where people are reminded that basically during the years you just talked about, the last 3 or 4 generations, people have come to expect, and I sort of peg it at Hurricane Katrina, right?
Yep.
Ever since then, it's like anytime a bad thing, define bad thing any way you want, anytime a bad thing happens in your life, people knee-jerk now look to the government to solve it for them.
Mommy and daddy government
You
are going
know,
to come in
and the
help it out.
government sucks at solving those problems.
They suck at it.
You know, so think about this. If the government is going to fix something like Katrina or come in and provide aid, they can't just do that. You know, they have to create an entity of sorts,
Oh, right.
a department, a program,
Right.
and
A
FEMA,
czar.
a czar, and then
czar.
somebody's
Oh,
got to be
yeah.
in charge. And what's that person making a year? You think? And then what's the right hand guy
Right.
to that person making a year? And think of all the people that get employed to write one check to a local state that could you could just write the check,
Yeah.
but you can't do it. So they create a whole nother department that's got its whole nother payroll structure. It's costing billions,
Right.
and billions to send the same amount, probably less than they would have if they just sent a check. And I'm not saying you should even send the check. I mean, look,
That's right.
If I don't expect my parents to pay for my mortgage, and then I don't expect it. It's not going to happen.
Right.
I'm going to figure out a way to do it myself.
Right.
This is like common sense. Well, that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
common sense, Ohio.
Right. You're right. Yeah.
This just makes common sense.
Well, and the one thing you describing it that way, the one thing the government does do very well, though, they build bureaucracy.
Oh, they're
very
great
well.
at that.
They're
They-
fantastic.
That's a home run for them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all they can really
And
do.
for all of the bureaucracy, guys, there's no accountability.
None.
Exactly.
Look, so all of this money we've given Ukraine, it's a great example, right? They don't know where it went. And you would think, we're the guys with the clipboards sitting in Zelensky's office saying, okay, you just got $1 billion. Now let's see how you're going to spend it.
So you think,
it
is
doesn't-
it
My
gross
God.
incompetence, or is there something more at play? And I
It
think maybe a
doesn't
little bit of
matter.
both.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It doesn't matter to them. It's, I think
yeah, we got to do something.
you wonder why they
Right.
don't want sunshine on the problem.
Right.
So if I'm running a business upstairs, as I'm doing, and we're running a business down here in this podcast studio, and our individual podcast is a business of sorts, and
Right.
I know where the money is. I know where it's going. I know what I'm paying for, and I know what I'm not paying for.
Yeah.
And I have a fiduciary responsibility to both of you and to myself, if there is such a thing, to not waste money.
Sure.
So I'm not going to go buy the proverbial $1,000 hammer
Right.
or line item it as $1,000 when I'm really bearing an expense that's something else that's costing $1,000 that I don't want to tell you to I'm buying. So why does the government get to do that to us?
Right.
And everybody's like, oh yeah, whatever. It's always been a deficit. No, bullshit. I mean, it should.
No.
We collect, like, I don't even know what the number is, how much we collect as a federal government in taxes every year from our. Like, you get taxed when you're born, you get taxed when you die, you get taxed when you make money, you get taxed when you buy stuff, you get taxed when everything's a tax. There's enough money.
So I spent a little time with my personal Glenn Harper, okay? And she popped up on the screen. The federal budget annually is $6 trillion. We're in debt $34 trillion.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale of it is just
It's immense, and it's getting bigger.
Yeah.
So, like, look, we've all had to do this on some level. I mean, every year in my business, I decide, all right, how much do I want to spend in marketing? How much do I want to spend on labor? How much do I want to spend on paper and pencils? And what's my rent? And can I expand? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And if I want to buy like a new computer, then I know that I don't get the luxury item that I would have had at home. So as a business, I was like, all right, well, I get the new computer system. I updated all the internet around here this year. It cost me a pretty penny. So I got to take home less, right?
Right.
And that means I didn't buy something else at home that I would have. The government doesn't work that way. They just say, you're not paying enough, Norm, so we need to collect more from you, Brett, because we want this. We have to have it. It's a human right.
right.
It's a human right. It's a
Bernie.
human right to have an education. It's a human right to have a house over here. It's not.
I mean,
It costs money.
I put it in terms that like my sons can understand. It helps me understand, frankly. Not talking down to my sons, but to create an analogy. So if you take $6 trillion and you say that's 60,000, and you take $34 trillion and say that's 340,000, that's like a guy who makes $60,000 a year paying off a $340,000 Ferrari. It makes no sense at all. You're so upside down, and it's so absurd. How we got into this. The PPP program and Social Security
it's dumb.
misspending and just the
You
military.
may not even want to call it a $340,000 Ferrari. It's a $340,000 Honda Odyssey.
Yeah.
It's not even a Ferrari.
It's
Right.
not even a Ferrari.
It's some obsolete DeLorean.
But no, I think it's a nice way to water it down to think about that.
Yeah, it's
That's
crazy.
Because we cannot wrap our heads around $340
So what did General
trillion
Patton do today? You must have something.
Oh, are we ready for this day in World War II?
Sure, why not?
Let's go from something frustrating that none of us can do anything about to something history, which we can't do anything about that either. But it's more
So
fun.
if you think where we are, we're in November, right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And in 1941, we were just sort of whistling along, having a good time, snapping our fingers, watching our kids play in the park, actually suffering probably from the depression. But
had a great radar station in Hawaii.
Had a great radar station in Hawaii.
We were all ready to detect, bombers and fighter planes coming to attack Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. So in 1941, on this day, Joseph C. Crew, U.S. ambassador to Japan, cabled the United States State Department that he had heard Japan had prepared a plan to attempt a surprise attack at Pearl Harbor. The attack was, quote, planned in the event of trouble with the United States.
Wow.
And of course, we had all the warnings, we had all the foreshadowing, and still we were just whistling along.
Yeah.
And
lining up the planes in perfect order so they could be strafed very conveniently at what's it called, Hickson Field, or whatever the name of the Army Air Corps field. All the airplanes, all the P-40 Warhawks were lined up.
They look good from the air, didn't
They
they?
look great, man.
Like you see those pictures.
And Battleship Row was packed. Like most of our fleet, Pacific Fleet battleships were there. None of our carriers were there. That's where we really lucked out.
We lucked out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we only had 4 carriers at the time.
I mean, it really, like if you think about it, the U.S.
the
did
Pacific.
not want to get involved in the war.
No.
Or at least part of us, some of us did, some of us didn't.
Yeah.
I think Roosevelt was chomping at
Churchill
the bit.
was knocking at his door like
Churchill and
constantly.
Roosevelt, if you read those correspondence back and forth and some of their...
They knew we were going to get in
sooner or later.
at some point.
Sooner or later.
Yeah.
I mean, we were funding it and sending guys over there doing lots of stuff. But, I guess it took that surprise attack at Pearl Harbor, and we had warning of it. And, it sort of wonders, I'm no expert on this, but I'm sure the conspiracy theorists would say, well, we knew and we were okay with it because they wanted us involved. I don't buy that. I don't think anybody wanted our guys to get slaughtered at Pearl Harbor or bombed
that
or anything else.
lieutenant who was at the radar station, state of the art, like this would be like their version in 1940s of Reagan's Star Wars technology, right?
Yeah.
This was there basically wasn't radar until right before World War II.
Yep.
And everybody, the Germans, the Italians, the British, everybody's experimenting with radar. And here we have this concentrated field of bumblebee, hits on this radar screen. And the operator turns to the lieutenant. I used to know the lieutenant's name. And, I mean, can you imagine being that guy? And he told the operator, no, don't call that into headquarters. We're expecting some B-17s coming in.
Yep.
And so that's probably what that is. And a guy's like, well, man, that looks like a bigger cloud than 2 or 3 B-17s.
Well, and again, you can, like with 2020 hindsight looking back, and maybe even like not even from 2020, maybe from 1942 looking back, just a month later, or even 6 months later, when we really understood radar. We were just, these guys are brand new on radar. They didn't know what they were looking at.
A brand new thing.
Yeah. So could it have been B-29s? Could it have been a flight
17s
or B-17s rather? Could it have been a squadron of Japanese dive bombers?
Yeah.
Right.
Could have been.
Maybe.
You
know. And imagine a world where there's a Japanese fleet out there and you didn't know where it was.
Yeah,
like that doesn't exist today.
No, we have satellites.
Warfare is totally different. Yeah. So, like there was a time when there was a fleet of enemy ships floating about the Pacific, and you didn't know where they were, or our country didn't know where they were. It's sort of crazy.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it too, that's a really good example of how many times have we been pulled in, kicking and screaming into a war. We don't go aggressively, and you know what I mean.
Does not
for the most part.
Despite the wokesters, we do
for the
not.
most part.
Yeah,
we go in kicking and screaming, going, "Oh, okay."
Well, look, that's a great point. Particularly what's going on in Israel.
World
right
War
now.
I's a good example of that too. We didn't
not
enter
get
until
involved.
the final year, basically.
So for the most, I mean, not every example, but
you're no. I mean, look, we did not even 1776. I mean,
they pushed us so
like
far
the
we had
revolution,
to.
It's like it was a reluctant engagement for most Americans, I think.
Yeah.
1812, people were ambivalent about that.
I think the Gallup poll done during the Revolutionary War indicated that only about a third of the American population was in favor of
Right.
the revolution.
Yeah.
You know,
Just a bunch of
the other
farmers and
two-thirds
guys.
were like, hey,
Whatever.
hey,
I'm
but-
living just normal,
Right.
just
Because
fine.
the money's flowing from England. I'm cool with it.
yeah, and it doesn't
I'll pay
affect
my
me.
tax. You
Yeah,
know, stamp
or
tax.
they're living off the grid, I think, is
Yeah.
really what was going on. And then in 1812, nobody was really involved. Nobody really cared about the war. And then Britain did something stupid, like go burn the White House.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, all right, you sons of.
And impress sailors from merchant ships into the
But
British
but
Navy.
even then, I think most of the country didn't care or
Probably not.
weren't directly affected. Now, I think that might be probably has a lot to do with media. Like it's
Yeah, right.
it's like you
Right.
don't really know what's going on.
CNN did not cover that story
So
in
it wasn't-
1812
You,
very
you
well.
weren't getting manipulated
Yeah.
by an
right.
ever-present, omnipresent media at that
You know,
time.
the most outrageous thing about Pearl Harbor that I think about, so you guys all know about these novels and shows. A lot of people know about this alternative, it's kind of a gaming thing, alternative World War II history, what if kind of stuff. The most amazing thing to me about Pearl Harbor, it was the reaction by Hitler in Germany. So obviously we were attacked by Japan. We were not attacked by Hitler's Nazi Germany.
Correct.
Okay. So they had formed, this tripartite kind of alliance, Italy, Japan, and Germany, right? The Axis. And Hitler, like 2 days after Pearl Harbor, decides, okay, since America declared war on Japan, I'm going to declare war on America. Otherwise, technically, we would not have been at war with Hitler's Germany.
Yeah, what do you think about this? Because
Isn't
I
that
know this
amazing?
history, and Hitler, and they say that was one of his big mistakes, but it wouldn't have been long, right? I mean,
He would have done something.
we
else.
would have.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
once we're in the war, we're in the war. It's like, what are we going to do? Just fight Japan and not its allies?
Especially when the Axis is there.
Right.
So you kind
got-
of declare war on one, you kind of all three. That's what an
right.
Axis
And
is
you got,
about.
you
kind
got,
of, yeah.
and that was before
Yeah.
1941. Right. So we didn't, like, Soviet Union was still, or Russia was still,
Yeah.
I guess, in somewhat of an alliance with Hitler at that time.
Yeah.
But we would have still had Churchill crawling up our backside. We
You know how
still would
many?
have had-
You know how many members of Congress voted against the resolution to declare war against Japan?
how many?
One.
One. I mean,
And
I saw
she
that,
was
yeah.
the Democrat congresswoman that, when he got out of the Army, Richard Nixon replaced in her district. He
What
he
district
ran
was it?
on that. Somewhere in Southern California. You know, he was from San Clemente.
Yeah.
And he ran on the basis that Harriet, I think was her first name or whatever it was, that she voted against the war.
How do you in good conscience vote against that? I don't even know. I mean, who knows?
She was probably a Quaker, like he was. You know, he was a Quaker.
Maybe she's a Quaker.
Or
Maybe
she's the first original.
Just believe-
She's the first Karen, possibly.
Harriet the Karen. Right.
Well,
Anyway.
we have a pretty serious case that we discussed ahead of time. And we're coming at this child pornography case from the point of view of First Amendment, almost absolutism that I think all three of us believe in. After all, we're on the internet. We'd hate to be canceled. We're on various platforms. We don't want to be deplatformed. But anyway, this child psychiatrist in North Carolina was federally charged and tried and convicted and sentenced to practically 40 years in a federal pen for creating for his own gratification or whatever use he created it for. But he didn't distribute it. He didn't transmit it.
No. He was creating.
He created porn for his own consumption.
No, he
is
was-
my understanding.
Except didn't he have surreptitious cameras taking videos of
yeah.
kids in his house?
We can get into how he created
yeah,
the porn.
I mean,
but
that's
I'm
pretty
just,
egregious stuff.
I'm just saying he wasn't a peddler, so it wasn't like he put it out there for other people or sold it, or he wasn't a merchant. He created child porn, and I'll just very quickly hit what I think the most interesting part of the facts are, to me anyway, from a First Amendment point of view. So he took pictures and video primarily of children, in one case an adult who former patient of his who later turned 18. But for the most part, for simplicity's sake, he took pictures and video of children and then used artificial intelligence programs to disrobe them, to make them naked, and to create a montage or some kind of video or pictures that were pornographic using their actual faces but not their bodies. And
I think he was also
Go ahead,
he
Steve.
also had downloaded some other, like he had a general cache of child pornography that he had downloaded and obtained in other ways. So that all that is true.
Okay.
Like, this is like the most egregious form of child pornographers there. And look, is there any other kind? You know, it's sort of like,
well, people that
No,
would
but there
sell
are.
it, I think,
Yeah.
are even worse.
there are.
Right.
And look, I mean, people don't like this because it's unpopular, and I've been criticized about my thoughts, and you know, I've defended folks who are charged with child pornography many times.
Well, they're entitled to a defense.
And you know,
Yeah.
I've seen categories of them. You have folks who are a lot of folks who were abused themselves as kids, and then they're somehow drawn to it. You have others who have sort of anxiety, ADHD, and compulsion issues, and it just leads, like regular porn leads to this sort of, you know, it's like there's no satisfaction, so there is no limit on it, and you sort of remove your own personal moral limits like you might with an addiction.
So, Steve, can I ask the Holiday Inn expert question? Right.
Sure.
So I'm not a lawyer. I went to law school, but I've stayed at a Holiday Inn. Okay, so that makes me an expert, I guess. So let me ask you my non-expert question. The only aspect of this case that bothers me, okay, is who's the victim. Okay, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, if a person would paint that, or if a person would sculpt it out of clay, or if a person would draw it with magic markers. So he used AI, and he started off with actual pictures of actual people, children, right? And then he did not transmit that to anybody else. So nobody else in the world, according to the facts, or let's just assume these are the facts just to make it easier to talk about. He didn't share that with another child pornographer consumer. He didn't put it on the internet. The children never knew he did this. Let's just assume that's true, and it may not be true, but just for discussion. So what I'm trying to get at is, what is it about AI, or what is it about photography that is different than drawing it or painting it or making a sculpture?
Well, I mean, look, this is all pretty complicated stuff, and I'll try to simplify it because it all goes back to the First Amendment. You have a right of freedom of speech. So you would say, well, who the heck has a right of freedom of speech when it comes to child pornography? And well, I mean, it's like everything else in law. It all depends, and it's complicated. You know, this is the famous Potter Stewart quote about generally pornography is like, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And then there's a case going way back to well, boy, I don't even know when it was. I think back in the '64, there's a case. It was Miller was the U.S. Supreme Court case, and it basically said it developed a 3-part test that talked about, would the average person find this offensive? Does the community find this offensive, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go into the nuance, but there's a 3-part test, and basically what that was is a test for general pornography that defined it. It was a moving target. It's a terrible case if you believe in some sort of legal precedent, because it depended in large part of like what's acceptable in the community where it is. So what's acceptable in Ohio might be different than Hawaii or wherever, and that's what created all sorts of problems. So then, you know, anybody who's followed the Larry Flint cases, and you know, that was some interesting law and that stuff.
The prosecutor there being Simon Lease from Cincinnati, Hamilton County, Ohio.
Since he makes it big again.
Yeah.
Congress says, though, we're going to make child pornography obscene. You know, so Congress starts passing a law about child pornography, and they're going to outlaw it, even if it doesn't meet the Miller test. So the big question in a case called New York versus Ferber, Ferber, was whether, all right, so we have children depicted in pornography. Can Congress outlaw that without violating the First Amendment, even though it may not fit the Miller test? Now, how does it not fit the Miller test? I don't know. Go read the cases. But the idea is it's not pornography, but it involves children. Can we outlaw it? And the court says yes, because we have to protect children. If you've used children to create it, so we can outlaw it for other reasons, for the protection of the children. They're victimized by this. So therefore, Congress can prohibit it without violating the First Amendment. Well, then Congress also realizes, remarkably, I think back in like the 90s, they say, you know what, we envision a world where people are going to start creating virtual pornography, virtual child pornography, And what does that look like? So Congress passes a law that says virtual pornography. So what I think it was something like child pornography includes sexually explicit images that appear to depict minors but were produced without children, including computer-generated images that appear to be child sexual abuse material, which the court described as, quote, virtual pornography. All right, well, in Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition, I think back in 2004, the U.S. Supreme Court says that violates the First Amendment. So it is not, Congress cannot prohibit virtual child pornography. And, everybody's like, wow, this is crazy. But, the premise of the Ferber case was that you had kids that were actually victimized because of the creation of it. And they couldn't take that same reasoning and apply it to a virtual because there are no kids that are victimized as a result of the creation of it. So therefore, there's a First Amendment right to that. Now, you sort of fast forward 20 more years and you wonder, how does this fit within the context of modern AI? Because even in 2004, I don't think we contemplated the fact that you could virtually create something that looks completely real. We're not talking about cartoons.
In 2004, it would have been Photoshop.
Yeah.
You could photo,
Right.
Right.
And there was a lot of that. I was,
Exactly.
I was representing child pornography cases when that case came out.
Yeah.
And this virtual pornography, so if you had like pictures of young cheerleaders or something, they had to actually prove the age. They had to prove it was a minor, and
I see.
And there was a victim. And so then, now when investigators get involved in these cases, they meta tag images that get passed around the internet.
Oh.
And, at some point or another, a lot of those victims have been identified. So when it comes to proof in court.
Like a class photo that might be up on the internet from a grade school.
No.
It'll show that
maybe
that face of that child is the same face that's in this porn.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that what you mean by
maybe
a
it's like
meta
there was
search?
there was a victim, there was a movie generated or some complete, use the right explicative, created child porn with a real kid. And that kid was identified at some point, and now those images are tagged so they know that kid, and they can prove that was an underage kid at the time and it was real, so they can prove the case when somebody has that.
Like an on-video, that would be an on-video rape and abuse of a child.
Yes, and it's not child porn unless you can prove it was a child. So at some point, most of those have been proven, believe it or not. And, these are horrible victims.
Let me throw this at you. So we know our mutual friend, Adam Barney. He's part of the munitions law firm that you do a podcast with those guys.
Yep.
I had discussed this with Adam yesterday. And I asked him, how do you distinguish this? How is this different than that decision? And what he thought is perhaps because this pornographer started and continued to use with his artificial intelligence the actual face of an actual child. So rather than creating a virtual child, he used photos and videos of actual children.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he didn't distribute it, they were then victims, Steve. What do you think about that? That might have been the difference here, right?
No, I think what's really going on is, and we can pull it up and look at it again to get the facts, but I think this guy was doing a lot of other stuff too. So I think he was also downloading actual child pornography. I think they found a cache of child pornography in his storage devices. They found that he was actually videotaping kids surreptitiously.
Like over 1,000
I'm just talking
images
about
or
the
something
creation aspect.
Well, that's right.
That's what's
But
killing me.
But he didn't. The bulk of his 40-year punishment
Was the other stuff?
for the other stuff.
Is the other
I don't
stuff.
think he was even prosecuted for this stuff. But here's what happens at the time of sentencing. And I confess, if so, everybody's listening to this. I know we've got millions of listeners across the world now. So if I get the facts wrong, forgive me. I haven't actually read the pleadings in the case. But I would surmise that at the time of sentencing, what happens is we delineate. And this is where I started this conversation. So we delineate those. It's all the same crime: possession and dissemination of child pornography. All right. So how do you decide what happens to one guy versus another guy? And I say guy because mostly it's guys.
Yeah. Who didn't disseminate?
Well, some do, and they don't even know it. So
I'm just saying.
Got a peer-to-peer,
by accident.
If you've got a peer-to-peer network download onto your or a platform downloaded onto your PC, then
it could get out.
It's going out. And those are dissemination counts.
wow.
Yeah.
And how do you decide what happens to one versus the other versus the other?
Okay.
Well, you look for egregious facts. So one guy may have been what I call a looker and deleter. He's got this weird penchant because he was abused as a kid. Well, that's mitigating, right? I think anybody would look at that and say, all right, that sucks for him. It doesn't get him off. Like, he doesn't get to win. I'm not going to say get him off.
Right.
He doesn't get to win.
Right.
He doesn't get a pass for the child pornography.
Right.
But it mitigates what should happen to him.
Okay.
And then you get dudes like this guy, who's a child psychologist who is taking pictures of, I think, his patient. I mean, just horrible stuff.
Right.
Whether those individual acts were actually child pornography, they were certainly more egregious, and they warranted a pretty hefty sentence. I mean, 40 years is a number. I mean,
he got hammered.
He did.
And look, I've never been to a federal prison, but I've heard that they call them chomos, is what they would call them, child molesters. They're not going to be treated well in the prison. He's in for a rough life.
Yeah.
So he's getting his due deserts here. And so whether he was actually prosecuted for those sort of AI created images and pictures that he made, or the other stuff, he got more of a sentence because of the stuff, even if it didn't become a separate offense.
Okay.
So look,
I think that's an excellent explanation, given his occupation and his contact with children professionally. He violated all of that.
Well, that sentence certainly sends shockwaves through that career path.
Yeah.
Like, you have access to these kids.
Yeah.
Get your crap straight. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So well, I know you're going to go off on another.
No. I was just going to say
something in my mind. But if you're to create this, let's just say he did not steal images or didn't take pictures of real people. He created on his own through AI. He had a lockdown computer that had no other access. He wasn't disseminating. And it was all AI or a cartoon, that sort of thing. But somebody found out he was doing it. Just happened to walk by and they see on his computer. That goes back to my
I don't
First
think that's a
Amendment.
crime. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that's a crime.
That's what
Okay.
Steve was saying. That would be different.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't think
purport
that's a
it
crime.
at all. Okay, but it's as long as it's
that's protected speech.
protected speech. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
under Ashcroft.
Okay. All right.
So, but it
Just
looks like what
a
he
lot
did.
of speech is sick. A lot of
Oh, for
speech.
sure. For
These
sure.
people, Hamas, let's kill every Jew.
Yeah.
That's sick.
It's gross.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
But it looks like he was doing more than that, guys. Tatum possessed images and videos of child pornography between 2016 and 2021. The evidence revealed that Tatum secretly recorded a minor undressing and showering in 2016. Furthermore, it's discovered that Tatum made similar recordings of others, including a patient. So he was doing more than just doctoring
sure,
images.
yeah.
And
That's how he was able to create it. He took those images
and did more with
and
it.
then morphed them.
But he already had him naked, and so that's possession of, in Ohio, it'd be possession of minor nudity-oriented material.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because I don't know all the nitty-gritty. What I had heard about that shower scene was that was a child patient of his who after the child turned 18, then he videotaped that person as an adult. But it was still a patient of his.
Yeah.
So,
And the trial also uncovered Tatum's use of AI technology to digitally alter. See, I hate it when people split infinitives like this. To digitally alter clothed images of minors, transforming them into sexually explicit content. That's a different game. I think
that's the part I'm talking about.
That's
Steve.
but that's a realm that the Supreme Court is going to have to grapple with at some juncture, and maybe they're going to go back and revisit the Ashcroft decision. Maybe not. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm no scholar in that area. I probably could. Not that it takes anybody exceptionally smart, but it would just take an attorney to go and do the research, or anybody who's got a legal mind to go.
It's the
and do
AI
research.
aspect that drew me into this case.
Yeah, and look, it's been happening for years. So, like you said, Brett, with Photoshop. So, we'll see. Fortunately, the guy seemed to be caught with other stuff, and that's usually what I see. It's like the first types of folks, like the deleters, the lookers, the people who have got this addiction sort of thing going on based on their past or their own psychological problems. They're treated differently than the people who are out there creating child pornography, acting on it, wanting to have sex with kids, and heaven forbid, kidnapping kids and forcing them to do this stuff. I mean, those are, and in theory, they're very similar crimes, but they're treated significantly differently, and they should be.
Yeah.
Right.
And they should be.
And I want to put on record, and we talked about this before we recorded, I felt really weird Googling this stuff up. I just want to put on record just in case anything comes the wrong way.
I started with my legal search.
It's like, geez.
My legal search platform. So I did, because it's odd to type into Google child pornography.
So I had to go with incognito kind of stuff. It's like, I just wanted on the record, I was doing research.
Well, absolutely. Right. It's like, it's so, you remember when the, I'm forgetting his name, but the guy who put out all of that Defense Department information, on WikiLeaks, right?
Oh, yeah.
Assange, right?
Yeah, right.
So I looked at some of that, and I thought at the time, I'm sure there's somebody at the NSA, CIA, FBI that's not too happy that hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans are looking at stuff that is classified. But since it went out on WikiLeaks, I looked at some of it, right? And so, but I did it under the same auspices that I looked at this. It's a news story, and I felt compelled to familiarize myself as a, I think I'm a journalist.
Well, and we're in the First Amendment world.
That's right.
Podcasting.
That's right.
We want to make sure,
We are journalists of a kind.
Of a kind, yes,
So,
correct. Yeah, exactly.
A nasty case here locally involving a former Upper Arlington coach.
Cutler.
Teacher. Yeah. So there's a law that passed this year, if I understand this right, Steve will be all over this, called Marsy's Law. And the victim in this case, this abuse, this rape and abuse that was that is at the subject matter of this case, and this guy was indicted and and all that. And now he's got a plea deal pending. This all happened back in 2000 to 2003, involving it. Then at that time, this lady was 12 years old for the next 4 years until she was 16 years old. Sexual activity, intercourse, whatever, with this Madison County teacher. He then moved and got a job as a football coach teacher at Upper Arlington, and she came out of her therapy, I think in 2021 or so, reported what she had gone through, allegedly had gone through, to a teacher. The teacher was then compelled under law, reporting law.
Mandatory reporters.
Yeah. She had to then tell the Upper Arlington police. They investigated. And the prosecutors over in Madison County did not follow Marsy's Law and apprise her of the fact that a plea deal was pending. She learned about that through the Upper Arlington Police Department, not through the prosecutors over in Madison County, which is a different county than where Upper Arlington is located, people. It's the Upper Arlington's in Franklin County. This case against this putative rapist is over there in Madison County, and I don't know why they're going to plea deal. But her big problem is the plea deal is such. Her understanding and what the Upper Arlington police said, this guy will not be on the sexual predator, whatever.
Sexual offenders registry.
Registry. Go, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know the facts of the case, but I've represented lots and lots of folks charged with these kind of offenses, and they're tragic when it happened. They are tragic when they're false, right? And I say that because there are a number of these that are false, that didn't happen, for all sorts of reasons, And when I pick juries in these cases, I always ask, let's see a show of hands. How many people think that false allegations of sexual abuse happen?
Yeah, McMartin Preschool, big one.
And everybody's hand goes up. And how many have heard in the news, you don't have to tell me the case, but has anybody here heard in the news of a story where somebody was exonerated after 20 years of being in prison after falsely accused of raping a child? And, everybody's got a hand.
Yeah.
How many people think that the case they're working on at that time, that case, that the prosecutor, the caseworkers, the social workers, the police, the jury, the judge, how many think that they thought or knew they were getting it wrong at the time? And it causes everybody to pause. So how does that happen? How do we get to a spot where somebody gets falsely convicted of child sex abuse? And then that enters a discussion with my jury panel about all the emotionally offensive and overcharged, that's not the right way, but emotionally charged reaction, this guttural, oh, what a horrible creep. And here's what happens. And this is not to say anything about the case we're talking about. I'll get to that in a second. But here's what happens. We tend, as a society, to permit convictions on these types of cases upon evidence that would not be sufficient, even close to be sufficient in any other type of case. So, for instance, I had a case where a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old girl was living with her uncle at the time, and she said that a witch, there was a storm outside, and a witch jumped off the tree into her window and talked to her and said that her uncle is molesting her, and it went on and on and on and on. And my client was indicted on that. And that really was the allegation. There wasn't much detail to it. There was nothing else. And my opening statement, my closing argument in that case was like, imagine I can't remember exactly how I framed it, but it was like at the end I switched it and I was like, yeah, and it's a theft case. Like, who's going to convict on that in a theft case? Some witch told a young 4-year-old that there was a theft. Like, it wouldn't even have been indicted. And I'm not saying that we don't need to prosecute the cases that occur, but we have to be careful about prosecuting cases. Now, about Cutler's case, I don't know if this guy did it. I don't know that he didn't do it. But I do know this. These cases are treated seriously in the system. That was the purpose of my little diatribe, is that they are always treated seriously. I've never run into one in the last 28 years that a prosecutor thought, no big deal. It's just a girl who claims that she was abused by a teacher. It's like, of course they're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then why then is there a deal? Why is there some sort of concession being made by the prosecutor? And I know the prosecutors out there, they're not going to just make a concession because they don't care about a victim of crime. There's a flaw in the evidence somewhere. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I have no idea what it is. It might be that the disclosure was too delayed and it's not credible. Maybe there was a police search that's not admissible. I mean, somewhere there's a problem. And if a prosecutor thinks that they can win the case in front of a jury, they're not going to offer a pass. It's like a poker game. I hate to say that, but a lot of what I do is like a poker game. I wonder what their cards are, and they wonder what my cards are. What's a jury going to do with the case upon hearing it? And here I would surmise the prosecutor evaluated that question and had some concerns about their ability to get a conviction. All right. And so they offered a deal. Now, back to Marcy's law, which is a constitutional amendment in Ohio now that says victims of crime have a right to be present at every proceeding and have input and all this stuff. I hate it. I hate it with a freaking passion. Not because I'm unsympathetic to victims, but because it throws a gum in the works of the justice system. Prosecutors have to be able to evaluate their cases on the merit, not on the emotion. And when they evaluate cases on the emotion, two things happen. They may lose a case because they would end up trying a case like this one that they couldn't win. So a creep or a defendant walks free when he shouldn't on a plea bargain. He at least is convicted of something. Or worse yet, somebody is wrongfully convicted. That's how wrongful convictions happen. Emotional prosecutions lead to wrongful convictions. And having victims with too much input. Now, look, what is too much? You guys, these wise old General Assembly members and constitutionalists can tell me. But we're getting to the point now where I just filed a motion in a case. Everybody's heard of separation of witnesses, or at least most people have. So if you're a witness in a case, in a jury trial, in theory, you're not allowed to be in the courtroom watching all the evidence and watching all the other witnesses testify, because you can then gear your testimony to what you've heard. It creates some obvious common sense fertile ground for bias, or for witnesses to sort of shade their testimony to fit the evidence. With Marcy's law, I'm not allowed to keep out victims from the courtroom. They get to watch all the testimony, which is insane to me. So I've got a case coming up where there are two alleged victims, and they both get to listen to the other's testimony.
And they're on the witness list.
They're on the witness list. They're both going to testify, and they both get to sit in there for the whole time and listen to all the testimony. I mean, it reeks of problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's what Marcy's law says. So when we were here talking to the cops, I think we were talking about Megan's law at that point, but, or Reagan-Tokes rather, Reagan-Tokes, which is a different scenario. But as a wise judge once said, he was a judge up in a bench in one of the counties. I'm not going to mention his name. He just said, any law that's named after somebody is usually a bad one.
So Steve,
Steve,
as a take home here, so I'm thinking of this. So I'm not the parent of a young girl. Well, boys can be sexually assaulted.
Happens
too.
all the time.
Sure.
That's right. So I'm just thinking of this, but my sons aren't minors anymore. But I'm thinking of what the takeaway is, because this victim, this particular lady, and she's all over the news, so I don't mind saying her name, Essie Baird, bravely came forward. If all of this is true, and I'm just for sake of argument,
Let's take it as true.
You take it as true. She said she did not go to her parents. Her father died before she came out of her therapy and decided to talk to this teacher who reported the crime. And she's glad that her father didn't know about this, because he would have done something insane, she said. But her mother is very distraught. So, Steve, is the takeaway if you're the victim or know of a victim of abuse, you want to preserve that evidence. You want to get a rape kit done as soon as possible. You want to seek help at a hospital. In order for it to be credible and carry the day against the perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
The thing to do as a victim is get help, like
Yeah.
in real time.
Although that's not
because
easy,
otherwise it's a he said, she said
Yeah,
20 years
look,
later.
This is
very
20
years
difficult.
later.
This is very difficult. All there are experts in the field. I work with them regularly, and the child psychologists, and they would all agree resoundingly that delayed disclosures of sexual abuse happen, and not only happen, it has no impact on their credibility. You know, it's like you can delay for years and years and years, and then make a disclosure, and that shouldn't by itself say
in most
it's
cases,
not true.
It's still true. Okay.
There are some other things at play, though. When asked, kids almost overwhelmingly will disclose. So if you've got a specific ask, so if you go to, when I defend the cases, I try to get to the counseling record. So by and large, there's counseling records or doctor records. And my kids got the good touch, bad touch questions from a pediatrician. Is anybody touching you? Has anybody abused you? And maybe the questions have to be more specific, but when asked, kids will disclose. So it is also true, though, that delayed disclosures can be false. And how do you delineate the two? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's when the prosecutors have to evaluate their case. The strength of their case certainly diminishes by time.
Yeah.
For common sense reasons, like witnesses disappear, and maybe the
Memories
victim,
get foggy.
Memories get foggy.
You're 12 years old.
Yeah.
I don't remember 12 years. But again, that dramatic of an instance, you're going to remember.
Maybe, but it's also true.
But
I'll tell you what else is
your
true.
mind also compensates too, right?
Yeah, there's studies on this where they will implant memories.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say, like, there's been studies where suggested memories, like of birthday parties, and
Well,
how
that
we
was the
had a horse,
McMartin.
and
That was the McMartin
Yeah.
preschool case. The counselors injected scenarios into these
Yes.
kids, and the kids repeated it back.
it's called suggestive questioning. So how kids are questioned by the authorities initially is critical to the veracity of the allegation. So if a young kid, and the younger the kid, the more suggestible they are, and there's protocols for this that are nationally adopted, and Ohio doesn't always follow them, but there are protocols for how you conduct a forensic interview. And the problem is it's usually not the professional forensic interview that does the first interview, right? It's usually a mom or a grandparent or a family member, and a lot of times in the context of like a nasty divorce, it's a mom saying, "Isn't your dad doing this to you?" Or, and that happens a lot. So you see a lot of false allegations in the context of divorce cases.
And then to please the questioner,
That's right.
They're thinking, "Oh, I need to."
You don't want to say no to mom.
Right.
Well, I got to go
Dad.
along with the Little Red Riding Hood story.
It's happened. I've never been accused of sexual abuse, but similar things have happened in my life, right? Where,
Sure. Oh,
my
yeah.
kids will tell their mom one thing, and I'm like, no. Like it's my ice cream theory, right? They don't talk. Like she didn't extract any information about all the fun times we had.
No.
Only the bad stuff, right?
course.
So,
Right.
there's an inherent bias that we all walk around with, whatever it is.
Yes.
And that can impact the veracity of these allegations. The point is, there's more to it. I'm defending a case now where there's like these alleged victims were like 5 and 3 years old when it began, and they claim to have memories. And there's studies on this where kids will remember birthday parties that never happened. So they'll have like adults will talk about birthday parties all through the child's life, or I think that, I don't know the controls, but something like that.
Yeah.
And then when they're adults, they say, "Do you remember the birthday party where the horse was there and you had a birthday cake?" And, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And it didn't happen. Totally figment of their imagination.
Yeah.
It was a totally implanted memory.
Yeah.
Or suggested memory. It's, I guess, like anything in law, it's complicated. It's complicated. But this is not to say I'm not empathetic and sympathetic to
No, of
anybody,
course
let alone
not.
this gal who's been
Of
abused.
course.
Sure.
And Cutler had other problems too. I know he was a UA football coach and had some other issues. So,
Yeah. No, I think it's also important here to say that our system of justice requires a vigorous and competent defense, because we don't want innocent people being imprisoned.
yeah.
I mean,
no.
so the role of a defense attorney, like my father, like Steve, my deceased father, and Steve here, people will say, well, how, and this came up, my dad was a politician, so this came up in his debates against his opponents. "Oh, you're defending that murderer or that rapist or whatever." Well, have you seen To Kill a Mockingbird, anybody? Or have you read that book, or do you know anything about at all what the framers of the Constitution intended, both state and federal, is that if you can't afford an attorney to defend you, it's so important that society will get you an attorney.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And generally, the more attorney you can afford, the better you're off.
And your dad would appreciate this question. I do. When I pick juries, I also ask this generally I'll ask this question. It's like, how many people here, what do you think if you had to pick the top question I get, like cocktail party question I get as a criminal defense lawyer? People hear I'm a criminal defense lawyer. Right. And what's like, Norm, if I asked you, what do you think the top question I get is?
Oh, I think it would be, how can you possibly defend, some scuzzball, blah,
right,
blah, blah.
Right. Bam. Number one. I usually do it like Family Feud. It's like, all right, 100 people survey, top 5 answers on the board. Here's the question. What's the top question a criminal defense lawyer
but
gets at a cocktail party?
But they won't ask the cardiologist, how can you fix messy hearts?
And you know what my answer is to that question? It's like, sometimes people also ask other questions like, how much to get me off? It's like I get those. They're funny.
Right. Yeah.
But my answer is always like, you know what? Those are the easy ones. Like, those are the easy ones.
Yeah, that's right. That's a system.
Who has an idea of what the hard job is, what my real job is? What if somebody's not guilty and they've been accused? Right. Like, then how do you defend that guy?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do I come in here in front of you 12 folks with a guy I know didn't do it?
Right.
And the whole weight of the government is coming down on them with Officer, Jones over here and Trooper Smith from the patrol is going to come in here, and all these guys as caseworkers and police are all going to say he's guilty. And like, how possibly do I handle that? Like,
so Steve, you've never had a case, I'm guessing, in the state of Louisiana, right? So I think that's the only state of the 50 that has some remnants of the Napoleonic Code where you have to prove yourself innocent on some charges. The flip-flop, what it is in the rest of the country.
I'd be curious how that passes constitutional muster. But I mean, it
which, to have to prove yourself innocent, well, no wonder they took so many people to the guillotine.
Of course, right? Look, and it's not just that here's the thing. This happens in two ways. It's not, and sort of back to where I started, like, nobody thinks that it's hard to get your head around the fact that any government official thought they were actually trying to prosecute wrongfully somebody who was innocent.
Right.
And that did happen, particularly in Jim Crow South. I mean, it happened a lot.
Oh, yeah.
In Napoleon times. And But what you just said, like, think about how much abuse that gets. And I think this is where, as a broader common sense approach to government, like, the more power you give the government, the more power you give them to do those things. And the bad actors can take over and use those levers as a mechanism to prosecute their political opponents, for instance.
You guys want to do a couple of Ohio-based stories?
Yeah.
While we still have Steve here.
Yeah.
So there is a House bill. I don't think it's going anywhere because of the politics in Ohio, but it's interesting that this has been reintroduced again this session. The unions are, it's called House Bill 205, and all of the business organizations are against this. And what it is, it requires journeyman level training and certification like you would get in a labor union for any maintenance, construction, repairs, anything to do with the petroleum industry, oil, gas, coal, essentially fossil fuel industry. And I'm sure nuclear is in there as well. But anything involving that on the premises of those kinds of businesses or utilities, you have to have this journeyman level thing. And of course, the NFIB, Independent Business, the American Petroleum Institute, the Ohio Manufacturers Association, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, they are all opposing this because it would require journeyman level training, which nobody can really even know what that is, for people mowing the grass.
Yeah, this is
or fixing the air conditioning.
It's just a way to spend our money.
Exactly.
It's just a way to spend. Look, I don't think that government should have contract. I don't think the government should be responsible for mowing its own grass, for doing any of it. Not even in parks. I think the better play, if a government's going to own a park, contract it out to the bidders and get the best job. I mean,
that's right. Get competing bids.
Jay, the Exchequer, always comes in and says, you should see the equipment that Dublin has. I mean, they've got brand new trucks. They got brand new mowers. They got brand new trailers. Like, it's all brand new.
All brand new.
And they don't need it.
No.
but they can spend. Then they get their budget. Better buy it because our
Right.
budget's going to be over. Blah 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 blah. We're going to lose it if we don't spend it in
More
January.
employees,
in
more
December.
pensions to pay. It just goes on.
It's
and on.
lunacy. So put it out to the highest bidder and get this crap out of the government in the first place.
The other one is this developing story about this terrible bus crash, another
awful.
wreck involving a bus. So we had a student killed as a result of well, he was an illegal immigrant, and he did something, came into the lane over there in the Springfield, Ohio area earlier this year, and a school bus overturned. This case that happened just this week involves
Monday or I think it was Monday.
Tuesday, November the 14th, 9 in the morning. Apparently, according to the NTSB, which is investigating, there was an earlier accident or safety situation, and they were slowing traffic down because of an earlier incident. When this second incident took place, the deadly one where 6 people were killed and 18 others were injured, apparently and this is tentative, people, so don't take this as gospel, but apparently the SUV carrying the chaperones and the charter bus, which was a commercial bus, not a school bus, but, your big Greyhound type of bus that was chartered with 57 people on board, going to an Ohio School Boards Association meeting in Columbus to participate. And it was high school students, some teachers, and some chaperones in the SUV. The chaperones generally aren't allowed on the bus with the students, so they're in an SUV following is typically the situation. Because to be with students, you got to be fingerprinted. There's all this protocol, and typically parents are not approved to be with other students besides their own kids. So at any rate, the chaperones are behind the bus, supposedly. The bus and the SUV slow down because there is some incident taking place, and apparently, quote unquote, this semi-tractor did not slow down and rear-ended the SUV and the bus, killing 1 person in the SUV and 5 people, including 3 students on the bus. So a total of 6 deceased. And I saw the pictures. The bus caught fire. The driver of the bus, quite heroically, with 4 bones broken in his legs, still managed to open the doors, crawling around in the thing, open the doors to let the survivors out. So this guy was,
remarkable,
right? To have the presence of mind to overcome his own pain and do his job so people could egress.
So did anybody conclude what the element here of causation was?
The NTSB says it's going to take possibly 12 to
18 months. I'm thinking,
months.
holy
That's funny because every time
cow.
I have a case that there's an accident, they seem to know, like
immediately.
they'll jump to the conclusion immediately. And look, I don't have any fault
Yeah.
for somebody wanting to figure it out and get it right. I got to hunt, at some point we get to the law of unintended consequences, the more safety regulations, like you don't have people on the bus. Like I can't say that's like not permitting certain people on the bus and having this and having somebody follow. Like there's almost always adverse consequences to that stuff.
Yeah.
I'll be curious if there's an intellectually honest assessment of what caused this and what it was. I'd love to know.
Yeah.
I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Apparently,
there aren't going to many people survive a hit from a semi doing full bore.
Oh, yeah, right.
I mean,
No, of course
ultimately,
Yeah.
it just comes down to the guy just wasn't paying attention or
Right.
whatever.
It sounds like the semi driver committed a assured clear distance ahead violation and ran into somebody.
That's
and
the
killed.
initial gut feel
Yeah.
that I have too.
Yeah.
The pictures show the semi is still square. I mean, post-accident pictures, it's still square right behind the commercial bus, and they're both accordioned. Like the impact was super.
It's awful.
Let's hope that when you see those things, you hope that those that passed away from it was instant.
Yeah, you just don't want to
You
hear
just
that they
hope.
suffered.
You just hope. Yeah.
Yeah, you
So
just don't wanna hear they
the
suffered.
good news about the investigation aspect is that apparently so there were a total of 6 vehicles, 5 were in the accident, 1 other got some damage, another commercial vehicle, but apparently from an investigative point of view, if you want to call it good news, is that there are many of these vehicles, maybe all of them, have black boxes that have inertia data, who braked when.
It's really
and for how
remarkable
long.
what they can tell you.
Yeah,
Now.
so I guess almost like an airplane wreck, these black boxes may help tell the story.
They will. They will.
Wow.
So,
Well, look, I got something to talk about, and then we probably had to wrap it up.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So as we get into Thanksgiving, we should be thankful. I think we've all started this way. Let's sort of wrap it up this way. One thing people love to do is spend time with family. I think it's a lost activity to go spend time with your family in the woods while hunting deer. And if you happen to have kids and you're interested and your kid's interested in youth season, that starts on Saturday morning. So youth season, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, they carve out a separate season for kids to go out with their chaperones, hopefully parents or somebody, a mentor, and they get to sit in the woods. So I plan on doing that this weekend with my son in the woods. It's sort of an awesome around Thanksgiving type activity. And then of course the Orange Army comes out the day after the Monday after Thanksgiving.
So Steve, is this youth gun
season?
Gun.
So it's been bow season now for quite a while, but the rut is on. Everybody, those connoisseurs of watching deer do crazy things in the woods, it's happening as we speak. So there's lots of hunters and lots of trucks on the side of the road. So everybody be careful out there. That's the message.
In my county, and this goes back a number of years, but a farmer was shot off his tractor.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Right.
Guys, and guys climbing over fences that place the gun barrel up. As they climb over the fence, their toe or something hits the trigger.
Right.
Oh, come
I got a better idea. Unload it.
Unload the
Right. Unload it.
Honestly, guys.
It's like you're not gonna have to jump shoot a deer while you're climbing over a fence or going up to your stand or whatever. So we pray for the safety of all the hunters out there, and I also pray for I'm thankful for the opportunity that we still have to go spend time, because what you're not doing in the woods while you're spending time with your son or your daughter or hunting. It's like you're not watching TV in your family room, and you're not playing video games, and you're not staring at TikTok. Well, you probably could stare at TikTok depending on where you are, but I guess the point is like it's a great activity. And quickly, it's falling off favor in our society. So everybody be safe out there, and enjoy the pre-Thanksgiving week. And then the other caution I have is the biggest party night of the season is Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So next Wednesday, when your kids are home from college and they're going to go hang out with their buddies. Or if you're one of those kids listening and you're going to go hang out with your buddies, just be safe, man. Just be safe.
And guys, have we decided we're not doing a Thanksgiving show, or we are? What do you think?
The Friday after?
Yeah.
To be determined.
To be
determined. I'll probably be here.
Okay.
I probably will be too.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll be back next Friday.
And did you hear that collective from the audience?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank goodness. I heard it.
So we could talk about the Ohio State game. Will that have taken place?
That will not have taken place yet. That will be the day before the Ohio State Michigan game.
We'll do pregame chatter.
We'll do a pregame. We'll do pregame chatter. We'll do pregame pregame predictions.
So that'll be on Saturday following our show.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. It will be.
You're not going to go 2 weeks without Common Sense Ohio, but if you had to, you could still go to commonsenseohioshow.com and check out our backlog of episodes, which are gaining in number every week by one a week. You see that, Matt?
Stop it.
Doesn't that make common sense? So every week you get to go listen to another one. If you think that, oh man, I missed it, don't worry. Just go to commonsenseohioshow.com. And while you're there, you might as well subscribe, and you might as well like us on Facebook. So I searched on Facebook, and again, a ever-growing followers and likers on social media.
You're right.
After us. We got video. So how about video?
All of our friends.
Rumble.
All of our family.
Rumble, YouTube, Facebook. It's all there. See, we're on the cusp of taking over the world. Here at Common Sense Ohio, coming at you right from the middle, at least until now.